every year, this is what I wait for.
Hidden 23 feet underground, the tomb of an ancient Egyptian noble from the era following Tutankhamun's death.
Oh, what's that?
The chambers look undisturbed for thousands of years.
What are we going to find here?
Buried inside, an archaeologist's dream discovery.
Oh my God. Wow, I think I found something. It's amazing. Oh.
The Valley of the Kings, the final resting place of some of Egypt's greatest pharaohs. Here, in November 1922, British archaeologist Howard Carter discovered the tomb of the boy king, Tutankhamun. His discovery was a global sensation and the biggest archaeological find of the century. Tutankhamun became pharaoh in 1333 BCE. He died in mysterious circumstances, aged just 19. His tomb and its stunning golden treasures offer a window into how the pharaoh lived, ruled, and died. Today, our experts across Egypt investigate Tutankhamun to unlock the secrets of his reign. They search for evidence the boy king may have been murdered, of who may have had a motive to kill him, and look for clues in the Egypt he left behind. Near the city of Luxor in the Valley of the Kings, Egyptologist Alia Ismail investigates a mystery surrounding Tutankhamun's death.
Did Tutankhamun die of natural causes, or was his death a murder?
For 6 years, Alia has led an Egyptian team which has scrutinized every inch of Tutankhamun's tomb. The team is digitally scanning and mapping the valley's tombs to recreate them in high definition, an aid for researchers and restorers. Now she is returning to the boy king's burial chamber, hunting for clues to his death.
It's amazing to be here by myself and so close to the walls and the paintings.
Alia searches the tomb for anything unusual that could reveal suspicious circumstances around Tutankhamun's burial. She soon spots a clue on the walls.
Looking at the tomb, I could tell that this was a rush job, and that is because of these black marks that you see all over the wall, which were developed when the paint was painted directly on the wet plaster.
The black marks are spots of ancient microbial growth. They're evidence that the tomb's paint was still drying when the chamber was quickly sealed after the king's burial.
The reason that everything was hurried was that Tutankhamun died very young and unexpectedly.
Tutankhamun died around 1324 BCE, after only a decade on the throne. He was buried in a tomb in the Valley of the Kings that was so small it could barely contain all his lavish golden grave goods. He had no son, and his stillborn twin daughters were buried in small coffins alongside him in the tomb. His royal bloodline ended, leaving his widow, Queen Ankhesenamun, in need of a new husband, and Egypt in need of a king. Alia wants to examine Tutankhamun's mummy to find out if there is any evidence to explain why he died so unexpectedly. Today, it remains on display in his tomb, inside a special climate-controlled case.
This mummy is thousands of years old.
At first sight, the mummy contains few clues to the cause of the young pharaoh's death.
His mummy overall is not in a very good condition. It's really hard to tell how he would have died. But then I found that Early archaeologists have done some X-ray scans.
In 1968, British anatomist Professor Ronald Harrison conducted an X-ray examination of the mummy. Inside Tutankhamun's skull, Harrison discovered loose bones. It appears his skull was fractured, perhaps a sign that the young pharaoh was bludgeoned on the head. Part of his sternum and ribs were missing, and unlike most mummies, his heart had been removed. Later scans revealed a fracture at the base of his left femur. The cause of the broken leg is unknown, but the scans suggest it's possible that Tutankhamun died as a result of foul play. Harrison's X-rays caused a global sensation.
This is what led people to think that Tutankhamun was murdered.
Tutankhamun's death had become a murder inquiry, ancient Egypt's greatest murder mystery. To find out if Tutankhamun was murdered, Alia wants to investigate the people closest to the doomed pharaoh.
I want to find out who would have benefited the most from Tutankhamun's murder.
In Saqqara, 20 miles south of Cairo, archaeologist Ola El Aguizi and her team are excavating an ancient necropolis. It contains the tombs of the Egyptians who seized control of the country after Tutankhamun's reign ended with no heir on the throne.
Tutankhamun, who died very early, it was very dangerous for the country.
Ola has been an archaeologist for 5 decades and has been digging at this site since 2005.
Working in Saqqara and discovering and working on these tombs is very, very exciting for me. I like it because I feel I'm alive here. I feel that I am in the heart of archaeology.
Ola's interest in Egyptology began with her love of ancient languages. She can decipher and translate hieroglyphs fluently.
I am now as a full professor of ancient Egyptian language.
Last season, Ola uncovered the upper parts of a tomb belonging to a man called Ta Muya.
Oh, I can see a hieroglyphic text here. The name of the deceased, Ta Muya.
This season, Ola and her team hope to find Ta Muya's intact burial chamber. Intact chambers are incredibly rare and may contain stunning grave goods, including a coffin or a mummy.
Hopefully, yes, maybe the coffin on a lower level.
Ancient Egyptians were buried with things they thought they needed in the afterlife. Any artifacts that remain would hold clues to Ta Muya and reveal more about those who ruled Egypt after Tutankhamun and may have benefited from his death. Ola's team has located the top of the shaft filled with sand at the center of the courtyard in Ta Muya's tomb. Its position suggests the shaft will lead to his burial chamber.
We have begun to dig the shaft, which is always in the middle of the pillared hole.
The shaft is likely to be more than 20 feet deep. It could take the team a week to remove all the sand. Site director Tarek Tawfik oversees the operation.
They just are now making a chain of men, getting the sand up and then into the carts and being taken to the hill over there.
Okay.
So this goes much quicker now.
The team quickly dig out the top layers of sand. But now, 7 feet down, they are too deep to pass the heavy buckets to the surface by hand.
Now they're putting the winch that they will be using to lower the buckets for the sand. They will not be able to go down without it.
The giant hand-operated rope winch should help the workers lift full buckets of sand and speed up the excavation.
It might look primitive, but it's very effective and quick.
But it's not long before they hit a problem.
We are finding the block in the shaft.
Workers discover large pieces of limestone blocking their way.
We have to remove these huge blocks from inside.
The shaft is now almost 10 feet deep. They need to work out a way to remove the heavy limestone blocks if they are to reach the bottom and find out if there's a burial chamber below. In the cliffs near the southern city of Aswan, Italian archaeologist Patrizia Piacentini is investigating a vast necropolis.
I'm here because I want to know something about the history of the past and to know the people. It's the beautiful part of our work, really to not only to study the pharaohs, but also the normal people and the child.
This season, her efforts are focused on a tomb filled with the bodies of young adults and children. Tutankhamun died a young man, and Patrizia wants to know if the bodies here can offer clues to why Egyptians, from pharaoh to farmer, died so young.
We have still a lot to do here. We are just, I'd say, at the beginning of a great adventure, I hope.
Patrizia found the rock-cut tomb buried beneath the sand during an earlier season. It has burial recesses carved into the walls. Patrizia's team uncovered dozens of mummies inside, and she's convinced there are more to be found.
My friends are still here.
Human remains and objects that they catalogued last season still line the floor.
Oh, yes, still good. Still, all the bones are still here.
They've already made one key discovery.
We found wood, and at some point, some hieroglyphic inscription came out. And we discovered the name of the first owner of the tomb. The name is Pamerich, and he was the chief of the army of Aswan.
Pamerich was a standout figure in his lifetime. But he was just the first of many who used this tomb over the centuries.
We found more than 40 mummies.
But Patrizia's most shocking find was several mummified children.
We had a very incredible discovery because just here there is the child in between the father and the mother. And then this recess is full. There are, I think, 5 mummies of children. These are my children, my wonderful, 4 babies. But this is the very strange thing of this tomb, because we have so many children here.
Patrizia wants to know if the bodies here can offer clues to why ancient Egyptians, like Tutankhamun, died so young. There is one uncleared recess left to investigate.
This is the last part. We didn't touch this. It was too late last season.
Patrizia must remove the mummies from the recess to analyze the remains properly.
Galal!
But this is too delicate a job for Patrizia to do on her own.
The workers! Thanks!
The remains are thousands of years old. Patrizia's team must carefully remove them one by one.
Shwaya, shwaya. Slowly, slowly. Shwaya, shwaya.
It's a painstaking process. Each mummy is incredibly fragile and could easily break.
Very careful. Very, very careful. It's fragile.
At Luxor Temple, on the Nile's east bank, Alia is investigating Tutankhamun's death. After more than 3,000 years, direct proof of who might have murdered the boy king no longer exists. Instead, Alia wants to scrutinize those closest to Tutankhamun to work out how they may have benefited from his death, and therefore had motive to murder the young pharaoh.
Wow, here we have the statue of Tutankhamun, hiding away behind the column. I can tell it is him because of the soft skin, round face, and all this is like features of youth. And he's represented here with his queen and wife, Ankhesenamun.
Ankhesenamun wasn't just Tutankhamun's wife. She was also either his sister or his half-sister. It was common for Egyptian royals to marry their siblings. They believed it would maintain their family's sacred bloodline and seemed unconcerned by the health problems inbreeding causes.
We see it in a lot of representations that they were quite close together.
Ankhesenamun would have had ample means and opportunity to murder Tutankhamun. But Alia wants to know if the queen had the motive to kill him. In an ancient tablet, likely written by Ankhesenamun, Alia has found evidence of the impact Tutankhamun's death had on the young queen.
This clay tablet, it was written in cuneiform, and that was used by the Hittites.
The Hittites and Egyptians were fierce rivals at this time.
In the letter here, it says that Queen Ankhesenamun wanted to ask King Suppiluliuma I to send her one of his sons for her to marry because her husband died.
The plea hints that after Tutankhamun's death, Ankhesenamun was worried about who she might be forced to marry, and that her new husband, crowned pharaoh by their marriage, would not have royal blood.
She could not bear the thought of marrying somebody who was not of royal descent, and therefore she asked for help externally.
Marrying a non-royal seems an unlikely prospect for a queen. Purity of the royal bloodline was vital to ancient Egyptians.
Her sending this letter shows to us that she was scared.
Suppiluliuma, the Hittite king and enemy of Egypt, was suspicious of this unconventional marriage request and summoned his council for advice. After verifying the letter was genuine, he sent one of his sons, Prince Zenanza, to marry the Egyptian queen. But the prince died before he reached Egypt and his young bride-to-be. So Ankhesenamun was left with two potential husbands: Tutankhamun's chief advisor, Ai, or the head of his military, Horemheb. The marriage would hand either of them the throne. Reaching out to Egypt's enemy was an act of desperation. It suggests to Alia that Ankhesenamun did not benefit from the death of her husband, and that she did not have a motive to kill Tutankhamun.
There's no way that Ankhesenamun would have killed Tutankhamun, because his death was a devastating disaster in her life.
Now, Alia wants to continue her investigation to uncover if there's any evidence that either Ai or Horemheb murdered Tutankhamun. At the Saqqara necropolis, Ola's team is trying to remove large limestone blocks from a deep shaft. Ola wants to find out if the shaft will lead to the burial chamber of a man called Tarmuir, who lived in the era following Tutankhamun's death.
It's a block, a very big block. It might be still part of the lining of the shaft.
Ola hopes that the burial chamber could reveal more about Tarmuir.
I would have hoped to be down further, 2 meters at least, by now.
The first block comes out easily, but the next is larger and heavier. It will put the wooden winch to the test. It takes the strength of 6 men to lift the block.
It has no inscriptions. It's part of the lining of the shaft. So it is a big, dead fish.
The team find no more blocks, so they can now make faster progress. Finally, they reach the bottom of the shaft.
I'm excited to see what's going to be found.
To see what lies at the bottom, workers must carefully lower Ola down in a large metal bucket.
It's an adventure.
But the team must take care. The shaft is now 23 feet deep. A fall here could be fatal. At Luxor Temple, Alia investigates Tutankhamun's death. She wants to find out if the two most powerful men under Tutankhamun, his trusted advisor Ai or his military general Horemheb, had motive enough to kill the boy king. Alia searches a part of the temple built by Tutankhamun. Carved into a wall, she spots an intriguing clue.
Here we can see an image of Tutankhamun, and he's burning incense for the gods. He's doing this for the Opet festival ceremony.
During the Opet festival, statues of ancient gods were paraded from Karnak to the temple here at Luxor.
What is very surprising are these two cartouches, because they are the cartouches of Horemheb. Why is Tutankhamun standing next to the cartouche of Horemheb?
The image of Tutankhamun appears elsewhere across the walls. But his official name, written in an oval box or cartouche, is missing.
This is where Tutankhamun's birth name and throne name would have been. So probably these cartouches were usurped. Horemheb chiseled them out and put his own name. And that way, he was erasing Tutankhamun altogether. This name here in this temple, this is eternity for a pharaoh. And when the pharaoh's name is erased, you are taking away this eternity from him. And to take that away from Tutankhamun, Horemheb has done him a great wrong.
The altered images suggest that Horemheb tried to wipe Tutankhamun's name from history.
Horemheb wanted to erase Tutankhamun.
Next, Alia plans to investigate Horemheb's tomb to find out more about this suspicious military general and uncover whether he had motive to murder the young pharaoh. In Aswan, Patrizia and her team are removing mummies from a recess at the back of the tomb.
I was waiting for this moment because we left these two mummies in their place and we want to see what's behind.
This tomb was filled with the mummified remains of children.
Slowly, slowly.
Patrizia's work could offer clues to why ancient Egyptians like Tutankhamun often died so young.
Be careful.
To Patrizia's trained eye, even a mummy in this condition can contain useful information.
Oh okay, so, some of them were perfect, and some, unfortunately, I'd say probably bad kind of mummification in later times, and this is ended up like this. Oh, that's gone.
They begin to remove the second mummy from the recess.
We must be very careful. Then we... Yeah.
This mummy is in better condition.
Benches are very well preserved. The body not, but... Okay, let's go.
The recess now looks clear.
So we just clean a little bit, very carefully, and then I will come up to have a look if there is something left.
Patrizia wants to check that they haven't missed anything.
So, it's okay. Wait a minute, I have to go in. I try to go in. Oh. Oh my God. Oh. Okay.
It's yet another child mummy.
3 years old, perhaps. So in this tomb, we found a lot of children. I didn't expect it here. I think in total, we thought there were 6 children, but now I think there are more.
Patrizia plans to examine all the remains collected from the tomb.
We will discover if it's a girl or a boy, examining him very carefully, and then we will know more. Adults is hard, but children is really touching.
In Saqqara, Ola descends a narrow shaft to search for Tarmweer's burial chamber. She hopes an intact grave and grave goods might reveal more about him and those in power after Tutankhamun's death.
Oh, what's that?
The shaft leads to a chamber with several connected rooms.
It's quite big. This is probably for the offerings.
The rooms have been looted. The tomb raiders have left only scraps.
There is some pottery here. It's something part of the tomb, part of the architecture of the tomb, because it has a shape here and rounded from here, part of a column maybe.
As Ola investigates, she realizes the room needs work to make it safe.
Enough here because it's dangerous. You see here, you see this? I just put my hand here, it's going. See? Huh? I'll go out.
Chunks of ceiling lying across the chamber's floor are a worrying sign it could collapse.
All this has fallen from the ceiling and from the rock all around. Of course, it is dangerous. If you don't do anything to support these walls, they might fall anytime.
But near the exit, Ola spots what could be another shaft in the floor.
If we remove the sand, we might find the staircase that leads to where we find the burial itself. But of course, it will need some time to remove all that.
Another shaft could lead to a lower level in the tomb. It's a promising sign the tomb raiders may have missed the burial chamber.
The lower shaft that's still full of sand, we don't know how deep it will go because it is quite wide. Till now, there are no clues. Till we remove this sand. A lot of work still to be done.
In the Valley of the Kings, near Luxor, Alia heads to the tomb of Tutankhamun's military general, Horemheb. She wants to find out if he had a strong motive to murder the young pharaoh.
I'm really excited to be here. I've never been here before.
The tomb is remarkably well preserved. Intricately decorated scenes cover the walls from floor to ceiling.
It is so beautiful to be here. The colors are vivid and the carving is strong. You can see it. I think this is one of the most beautiful scenes I've ever seen. This was not a normal individual's tomb. It's huge.
At the center of the burial chamber lies Horemheb's sarcophagus. His name and titles are inscribed on its sides.
Here you can see his royal name. It says Khiperu Ra Setib en Ra.
The huge stone sarcophagus inscribed with royal titles reveals that Horemheb ruled as a pharaoh after Tutankhamun's death. He clearly had something to gain from the boy king's demise.
Horemheb had the means and the opportunity to kill Tutankhamun if he wanted, because he had the command of the military and he could have easily directed anybody to do the job for him. Horemheb is definitely a suspect.
Horemheb was a soldier of humble origin. He worked his way up the ranks to become head of the military. When Tutankhamun died, Horemheb was leading Egypt's army in the north. but one of his soldiers at the royal court could have easily assassinated the boy king. Following Tutankhamun's death, it was the pharaoh's top advisor, Ai, who seized the chance to be crowned king. He may even have married the widowed queen, Ankhesenamun. Ai is a suspect too. He ruled as pharaoh for 4 years before he died and was replaced by Horemheb. Last season, Alia investigated the tomb of Ai and revealed that he was probably responsible for Tutankhamun's rushed burial.
I buried Tutankhamun in the smaller tomb so he could have the bigger tomb for himself.
Ai's actions are also highly suspicious.
If Tutankhamun was murdered, right now there are 2 prime suspects, Ai and Horemheb.
Both Ai and Horemheb had powerful motives to murder Tutankhamun. But there's another possible killer. Now, Alia wants to re-examine the young pharaoh's injuries in greater forensic detail. At the necropolis at Saqqara, Ola's team has secured the tomb's unstable ceiling and cleared the sand from the mysterious staircase in the floor.
It is exciting, and that's why I come back every year.
Ola hopes the staircase might lead to the intact burial chamber of a man called Muya.
If we find his burial chamber, it would also lead us to what person he is.
The workers prepare the bucket for Ola to descend into the tomb again and investigate what lies at the bottom of the stairs.
Every year, this is what I wait for.
If there's a chamber containing Muya's burial treasures, it would be a monumental discovery.
Oh, what are we going to find here? Oh my God. Look, look. It's amazing. Oh, it looks like a sarcophagus, you see here?
Ola spots the faint outline of a giant sarcophagus buried beneath the sand.
I just want to remove all the sand over it. It is a nose. It is a head. And it has also the beard.
The sarcophagus confirms this is the tomb's burial chamber. It is a hugely significant find for Ola and her team.
The scenes are very nicely carved. The face is so nice. The smile, he seems to have been a nice guy.
Ola notices that a piece of the lid has broken off. The damage indicates the sarcophagus was broken into by the ancient tomb robbers. But the hole gives her an opportunity to peek inside to see what's left.
It's empty. It's only some rubble, some bones.
Although the sarcophagus is empty, it's almost complete, and Ola can reassemble it.
The part that is missing, we're going to put it back where it's supposed to be. And when we empty all the sand around, we will be able to understand the text written on top, on the surface of the lid.
Now, Ola needs to find inscriptions and a name to confirm this is Muya's sarcophagus.
Ah, it's a big one, you see? All the text on the Inpu, the god Anubis. Now let's see the name, because all these are gods. These are the 4 sons of Horus. Ah, yes, here. You have the same title. It is Muya. It is the owner of the tomb.
Finding a complete sarcophagus in its original tomb is incredibly rare.
It's the most important discovery for us. It's the first time we find the sarcophagus of the owner as it is complete like this.
Studying the carvings and inscriptions reveals more about Tarmwea's life.
The texts are very important and very clear. It tells me that he is a very important person. Here you have the beginning of his title, Overseer of the Cattle.
The inscriptions show Tarmwea was born into a military family and educated as a scribe, around 50 years after Tutankhamun's death. He started his career overseeing the cattle and other resources of the king's temples. He rose to become chief treasurer to the reigning pharaoh, managing the wealth of the state. When he died, he was buried in a lavish tomb in Saqqara, alongside members of the ruling military elite who controlled Egypt after Tutankhamun's death. Tarmwea and his grand burial provide an insight into a tumultuous period of Egyptian history.
Tutankhamun, of course, when he died very early and very surprisingly suddenly, they did not have anyone to rule, and the country was in a very troubled condition. It was very important that the person who had to take the things into his hands will be a military guy, which is Horemheb.
Less than 5 years after Tutankhamun's death, a new breed of military pharaoh took over. Men like Horemheb, not of royal blood, who relied on officials like Tarmwea to support their position as pharaoh. Ola's team now have a lot of work ahead of them. They need to remove the rest of the sand and carefully study the remarkable sarcophagus to uncover the full story of Tarmwea's life.
This is a great discovery of the season, the greatest of the season.
In Aswan, Patrizia is investigating a tomb filled with the mummified remains of children to find out why Egyptians like Tutankhamun died young. Her team moves the mummies recovered from the recess outside into the daylight for closer examination. She believes the three bodies might be a family.
Let's see my family outside. Okay. So because of the height, this is of course the man. This is the woman, let's say the mother. And of course this is the child. To discover who were these people and this family, I mean, I think it would be just great.
At the team's dig tent, Patrizia's colleague, Carmelo Messina, is analyzing the rest of the tomb's remains to identify how the people died.
From looking at bones, we can obtain a lot of information like age, sex, the ethnicity, possible disorder, possible disease, and possible, maybe, cause of death. These are all bones of childs. You see how small the bones are. This is, for example, a tibia.
Oh, okay, Carmelo. So what's new here?
Carmelo spots a clue to a probable cause of death.
I found some interesting things. For example, look at this vertebra. It's completely deranged. Inside you have these holes. I think it's more likely to be a infective disease.
Okay.
It may be even a tuberculosis. And,
so tuberculosis.
In a late stage of tuberculosis.
Oh,
so
great.
probably this could be even a person with a systemic severe disease.
Tuberculosis is a bacterial infection that can affect all areas of the body. Left untreated, it can kill. In ancient Egypt, over 1 in 3 children did not survive beyond the age of 5. Many died from infectious diseases. Malaria was spread by mosquitoes in areas close to the Nile. And tuberculosis thrived in the cramped housing of the poor. With no recourse to modern medicine, such as vaccinations, even the children of kings died young. But the ancient Egyptians believed death could be overcome. and that mummification could help their lost children rejoin them in the afterlife.
This tomb is very interesting because we are discovering many children inside. In the past, children were found, of course, inside tombs, but here there's a kind of concentration. So this is one thing that we will study.
It's still unclear whether illness, famine, or some other tragedy is the reason so many child mummies were found in this tomb. But the remains discovered here prove that disease was rife in ancient Egypt. Analysis of Tutankhamun's mummy could reveal if disease played a role in his death too. 4 miles from Luxor, at the Valley of the Kings, inside the world-famous tomb of Tutankhamun, Alia investigates the latest scientific study that sheds light on the mystery of how the boy king died.
I found a CT scan, and it allows us to see the bones in greater detail. And there's DNA testing that was done to help understand if Tutankhamun had any infections.
Computerized tomography scanning produces detailed images of internal organs, blood vessels, and bones. The CT scan of Tutankhamun revealed that he was not a healthy king to begin with. Ancestral inbreeding led to a weak immune system and a club foot. Scientific examination of the fracture in his femur suggests a bad leg injury became seriously infected just before he died. DNA analysis, coupled with mosquito bites on his neck and cheek, indicate that he also suffered from persistent malaria. Most experts now believe that Tutankhamun's weakened natural defenses couldn't cope, and the infection in his leg likely led to his death.
Early archaeologists thought that Tutankhamun was murdered, and that is because of the fracture at the back of his head. The scans further show the dent very evident.
But the latest scans suggest that the damage to Tutankhamun's skull was likely caused when the embalmers removed his brain during the mummification process. The studies help clarify the decades-old debate around Tutankhamun's death.
I and Horemheb had the motive, means, and opportunity to kill Tutankhamun. However, archaeologists nowadays think that Tutankhamun died of natural causes.
Despite a wealth of resources at his disposal, Tutankhamun's death shows that no one in ancient Egypt, not even a pharaoh, was safe from the brutal ravages of disease. Tutankhamun died young and left no heir, but he lives on for eternity. Not because of a resurrection in the afterlife, but thanks to his remarkable discovery 100 years ago. His tomb and its beguiling golden treasures remain one of the most captivating archaeological discoveries ever made, offering a unique insight into one of history's greatest civilizations. In a 4,000-year-old tomb,
definitely is something very strange. We have the mortar sealing the tiles, and then here the sound is different.
Archaeologists search for a grand burial chamber.
If we have here something below, wow, that would be a fantastic moment.
And treasures fit for one of the most powerful men in ancient Egypt, who lived and died on the banks of the River Nile.
This could be the most important find of my career.
The Nile, the longest river in the world. It cuts through the Egyptian desert, running south to north through Africa, up to the Mediterranean. Its waters sustain life wherever it flows. Along its banks, ancient Egyptians built remarkable temples, tombs, and monuments. Today, archaeologists search for the secrets of the Nile, how it powered every aspect of life and death in ancient Egypt, and transformed it into one of the greatest civilizations of the ancient world. In Aswan, Spanish archaeologist Alejandro Jimenez Serrano is on his way to the tombs of Kebet el Hawa, cut high in the cliffs above the west bank of the Nile. The tombs Alejandro is excavating there were used by nobles who ruled from a fortified city on Elephantine Island in the middle of the river.
The West Bank was the necropolis, the city of the dead. Although in this area, the population was mainly settled on an island, it continued having the same meaning. The east is for the life, the west was for the dead.
Five seasons ago, Alejandro and his team uncovered a lavish tomb here, dating back to 1800 BCE, in between the golden age of the pyramids and the time of Tutankhamun.
It is a magnificent tomb with marvelous decoration, reliefs and paintings.
Alejandro identified the tomb's owner, Saranput, and discovered the key details about his life. Saranput was appointed governor of Elephantine by the pharaoh Senusret I. He commanded the Egyptian army against Nubia, its enemy in the south. From the island of Elephantine, he controlled trade on the Nile, importing great wealth for the pharaoh, including gold, ebony, and ivory. Saranput was all-powerful in the south. Second only to the pharaoh, he was the ruler of the southern Nile.
I've been working with Saranput and other members of his family during the last 20 years. In reality, I know his family better, perhaps, than mine.
But Saranput's tomb is missing one key feature, a burial chamber. This season, Alejandro wants to try and track it down, and perhaps find the body of the man himself.
We are going to continue the excavation of the shaft of Saranput. Perhaps his burial chamber is still intact.
The tomb is made up of a network of at least 9 shafts, stretching 50 feet below ground. Alejandro's team has made a promising discovery at the bottom of the 30-foot deep shaft.
Bilal has just begun the excavation of what we consider by now the antechamber. He's excavating in that side because if there is a burial chamber, we should find in this part.
He believes that this antechamber could lead him to the entrance of Saranput's burial chamber. Alejandro's team has to carefully sift through the sand and debris, looking for clues. They collect any fragments of pottery and human remains for further examination. The heat and dust is taking its toll.
You can see the working conditions here are very hard. We call joking the sauna to this place because there is a lot of humidity and we do not have fresh air.
Nice sauna.
Yeah. So we are going to try to breathe a bit.
The team works in 1.5-hour shifts, winching the spoil to the surface, bucket by bucket. It's painstaking work, but finding Saranput here would be a dream come true for Alejandro. And the fact Seramput had such a deep shaft here is a promising sign.
So much effort has to have a reason, and the reason might be an intact burial chamber.
At the island of Philae, American Egyptologist Colleen Darnell is traveling the Nile. She wants to unlock its secrets, starting with why the ancient Egyptians so venerated its annual flood. Her first stop is Philae Temple, one of the most sacred sites in ancient Egypt.
This was the border between Egypt and Nubia, where the Nile in Egypt really began. This is such a beautiful area of the Nile, particularly when we get close to the Temple of Philae. You get a sense of what it would have looked like in antiquity.
The temple, known as the Pearl of Egypt, was built up over hundreds of years, with each ruler making their own additions. It's dedicated to ancient Egypt's most revered gods and goddesses. In its prime, this island on the Nile was hallowed ground. On the southern side, a courtyard lined with columns led to an imposing gate carved with huge reliefs of Egyptian kings and gods. Beyond it, a small chapel honoring the birth of the god Horus, and the gate to the temple of his mother, the goddess Isis. Amongst Egyptian shrines, a temple built by the Romans centuries later. Egyptian pharaohs and Roman emperors alike were drawn here to build monuments by the Nile. Vintage clothing fan Colleen is an expert in hieroglyphs and has spent her career decoding them to discover the secrets of life in ancient Egypt. She wants to explore the temple here to find out why this Nile island was so important to the ancients. She searches for clues to help piece together the puzzle.
It's really so exciting to see this inscription because it's unique. It lays out on a single wall the foundational myth of the Nile flood.
Every year, the Nile broke its banks and flooded the land nearby, fertilizing it with rich river mud. The ancient Egyptians conceived a story to explain how this annual flood was created.
What we have is a serpent that forms the shape of a cavern. That cavern is the burial of Osiris on an island very close to Philae.
Ancient Egyptians believed the Nile flood was created from the death of their god Osiris, husband of Isis, father of Horus.
On this other side, we see the boulders of the first cataract, of the island where the body of Osiris is buried. There is a crocodile, in fact, a falcon-headed crocodile, that represents the god Horus, Osiris's son. And he is carrying on his back the mummy of his father Osiris.
Egyptians believed Osiris, god of regeneration and the underworld, was responsible for the yearly flood cycle of the Nile. In their myth, his brother Seth, the god of chaos, murdered Osiris in a fight for the throne. Seth dismembered Osiris and scattered his body parts across Egypt. The bodily fluids seeping from Osiris caused the Nile River to flood, giving the Nile its divine power to make plants grow. The Nile flood was worshipped by ancient Egyptians, and Philae was where they believed the river began.
This is a really special area because the Egyptians could assign this as the origin of the floodwaters. Symbolically and in their religious beliefs, this was the source of the Nile.
The Nile had great mythological importance for the ancient Egyptians. Now Colleen wants to unlock more of the secrets of the great river and how it helped create Egyptian civilization. In Deir el-Bahari, Polish archaeologist Patrick Chudzik is at a revered site on the west bank of the Nile.
On the horizon, we can see the Nile River. The center of this city was the El-Bahari, with the temple of Hatshepsut behind. And the temples at the El-Bahari were surrounded by dozens of rock-cut tombs of the high officials.
Patrick has been excavating the tombs in this important section of the Nile for 5 years. His love for archaeology started when he was just 8 years old. He promised himself that one day he would become an archaeologist.
It is wonderful when you're unearthing something which was forgotten for thousands of years.
He made one of the most unusual discoveries of his career on the hillside below the tombs. Several crocodile skulls.
This is the first such a discovery in Egypt.
Crocodiles are sometimes found in ancient Egyptian tombs, but finding disembodied skulls in this way is unique.
It seems to be one of the most interesting objects which I ever found here in my archaeological career, working here in the Theban necropolis.
This season, he wants to try and find out who brought the mystery crocodile skulls here and why, and what it reveals about ancient Egyptians' attitudes towards the deadly creatures who thrived in their sacred River Nile.
We have here 9 individuals of this river creature. We have fragments with teeth, we have fragments of jaws. But what is interesting, we have only crocodile skulls. We don't have any other fragments of their bodies.
Patrick and his team face an unusual challenge. Early archaeologists first discovered and excavated these tombs 100 years ago. They took the treasures, but piled the rest of the contents onto huge spoil heaps on the hillside below. Patrick thinks that the skulls came from one of the tombs, but he needs to find out which one and who it belonged to. He and his team must painstakingly work their way through all the spoil.
Every day we are finding such a wonderful decorated pieces. This is a very rich area. One of the hardest parts of the work here to recognize what is the natural fragment of rock and what is the fragment of something magnificent made by the people who worked here 4,000 years ago.
The discovery of an engraving or inscription could reveal the name of a tomb owner and tell Patrick which tomb the crocodile skulls originally came from. But the combination of steep slope and loose rubble makes work here hazardous.
When they move too much from the lower parts, then in every single moment it can fall down.
In Cairo, in the Egyptian Museum, Egyptian conservator Eid Merta is investigating an enigmatic statue of Osiris. Eid is a specialist in ancient metals who has been restoring some of Egypt's finest treasures for the last 10 years. He wants to find out when the statue was made and what role these statues played in the worship of the powerful god associated with the Nile floods. The museum has dozens of Osiris statues on display, but hundreds more like this one are held in storage.
They have been stored at the basement ever since the museum opened more than 100 years ago, and we didn't have any more information about them.
Most are unlabeled, and any clues to their origins have long since disappeared. Eid and French archaeologist Simon Connor have been working through the statues in the museum's stores.
It's not unusual to find them in this condition. In fact, most of them that we found in the basement directly came from the excavation, clearly. We still have the soil from the digging, so we are probably the first ones to see them for 120 years.
To date the statues, they have to restore them and examine their distinct features in their former glory.
Oh, wow. We still have some remains of gold at the surface. You see a beer here, and also we have some traces here between the arms.
Right.
Some of the statues, like this one, are bronze, gilded in gold. Many are heavily corroded, having spent millennia buried in damp soil and sand.
The problem here, we have two types of corrosion. The active corrosion in some parts, and this is the danger one, and we should start with it. And the other corrosion is stable.
So you think we can find again the feature of the god?
I think so. Will be under the crust of corrosion here. If we try to take this corrosion out step by step and slowly under the microscope, maybe we will be able to see the features again of the face.
Eid has his work cut out. One slip could damage the precious statue forever. In Aswan, Alejandro is looking for the burial chamber of Saranput, who ruled over the southern Nile and the land surrounding it 4,000 years ago. It could help him unlock the secret of the Nile's role in the lives and deaths of ancient Egyptians. After weeks of hard work, the team has successfully cleared several tons of debris from the antechamber. They've revealed a very unusual flaw.
It's the first time that we find a pavement in all the necropolis. Definitely is something very strange.
Paving slabs like these aren't found in any nearby tombs. Alejandro thinks they could be a clue to where Saranput was buried.
It is very exciting because, as you can see, we have the mortar sealing the tiles, and then here the sound is different.
The sound suggests an open chamber beneath, perhaps an entrance to the burial chamber itself.
So if we have here something below, we will have an intact chamber. So, wow.
Before Alejandro can begin to remove the paving stones, he needs to agree on a plan with the team.
The first thing that we can do is to remove some stones just to test what we have below.
The team needs to be careful.
I should begin lifting this stone. We check what we have underneath.
If there is a burial chamber underneath, removing the wrong paving stone could collapse the structure below, destroying priceless artifacts.
The main idea would be to remove the stones that are in the edges of the chamber. And we hopefully find something. So,
Inshallah.
The following morning, the team head back down the shaft to put their plan into action.
What we are going to do is to begin the lifting of these stones in order.
Colleen leaves the island of Philae and heads up the Nile. She is on her way to Elephantine Island.
This is Elephantine Island in the middle of the Nile River. This island has been inhabited for thousands and thousands of years.
She's traveled just 5 miles north from the Temple of Philae.
This is the gateway between Egypt and Nubia. And here, more than almost any other place in Egypt, we can see the drama of the Nile.
Colleen wants to investigate how ancient Egyptians used the power of the Nile. She believes a mysterious structure carved into the riverbank here may hold the answers.
This is an ancient staircase that leads all the way down to the Nile River. So every few steps, there are these strange markings as we go down the staircase.
Colleen notices an intriguing feature.
One thing that I can see here is that they're all very consistent. These markings are to measure the height of the Nile flood. And we can see the river here, the water would come up, and then each individual measurement they could take.
This monument is a Nylometer, and it was crucial to understanding the patterns of the river.
This Nylometer, this measuring device, and others on the island of Elephantine would have been the first place where the flood was measured every year. This was one of the most significant events that happened in ancient Egypt every year.
The Nile couldn't be tamed. But ancient Egyptians developed a sophisticated irrigation system of dikes and channels to harness its immense power. During the yearly summer flood, they siphoned water into enormous basins. Here, it sat for about a month, soaking into the earth and leaving behind rich deposits. Crops thrived in this fertile soil, leading to bountiful harvests. This life-giving cycle sustained the Egyptians and allowed their grand civilization to flourish.
The Nile flood began in late July or early August of our calendar. For the ancient Egyptians, that was the new year when the flood began. As the floodwaters started to rise, they continued to do that through October. Then would be the planting season and finally harvest.
The Nylometer meant the Egyptians could forecast the size of the harvest, food supply, and the amount the pharaoh could raise in tax.
This Nylometer is monumental, and it shows us how important it was to measure the Nile flood here at Elephantine. If you knew the height of the waters here, you could essentially predict where it would be in the rest of the Nile Valley.
The ingenious invention of the Nylometer meant the ancient Egyptians could fully harness the power of the Nile.
What made the Nile so special was that it had a predictable annual flood. That was the magic. That was the secret to the Nile that enabled ancient Egypt to flourish for thousands of years.
Colleen's mission to unlock the secrets of the great river doesn't stop here. Next, she wants to explore how Egyptians used the Nile to help them build their mighty monuments, the hallmarks of their civilization. On the west bank of the Nile, at Deir el-Bahari, Patrick is trying to solve the mystery of the 9 crocodile skulls found in a spoil heap below a series of tombs next to the temple of Hatshepsut. He is looking for clues that might lead him to the tomb the crocodile skulls likely came from. But his team faces a problem.
You're gonna lose rubble in every second. It can fall down like this moment.
Patrick thinks the crocodile skulls were once in the tombs above. He wants to find out who might have left them in a tomb and why. And what that reveals about how the ancient Egyptians perceived the dangerous animals that shared their sacred river. As the team carefully works through the dust and debris, Patrick notices something.
It's really amazing. Another fragment, the same what we found before. Another crocodile jaw. This is a really big surprise.
This crocodile jaw looks smaller than those he's already found. It must have come from a different crocodile, and suggests that more than 9 crocodile skulls were placed in the tomb.
This is really incredible.
Patrick also uncovers evidence to confirm this heap of rubble and the skulls do come from a tomb.
Yes, this is a piece of sarcophagus, a lower part of a wall. That's amazing. I didn't expect it here. Brilliant. Something new to reconstruct it. That's great.
Now, to work out why the crocodile skulls are here, they need to identify the tomb they came from and its owner.
Oh gosh, there is much more. There was also a piece of something.
In Aswan, Alejandro's team are searching for the entrance to the burial chamber of Sarenput. An intact chamber could contain a treasure trove of information about ancient life and death on the Nile.
It is bedrock. It is the bedrock.
The first stone slab they lift sits on a bed of sand with only bedrock underneath.
Okay, let's try this one. Yes. We have more sand here. There is no ramp, there is nothing.
Alejandro has left the most promising stone until the very end.
This tile has a different sound from the other. Might be something behind this. We will see if the last chance is here. Yalla? We have the bedrock again. We have the bedrock. So, this is the archaeology. You never find what you are expecting to find. We have just removed 4 tiles, and it is always the same. We have sand, and immediately after we have the bedrock. I feel quite frustrated because it seems clear now that we are not going to have the burial chamber.
But Alejandro has been rewarded with something else.
We are taking samples of sand. The sand from the Nile is more a pale color compared to the one of the desert sand.
Alejandro believes that the sand beneath the slabs was specifically brought from the banks of the Nile to this chamber.
Probably this special sand was chosen because it was coming from the Nile. The Nile means the life for Egypt. So basically, it was easily related to the sacred world and can be used in the funerary spaces. So anything that could help the deceased to gain the afterlife was used.
In the minds of the ancient Egyptians, the Nile would help them reach their ultimate destination.
Most of the people of this region were living in the East Bank or on the island. So when someone died, they have to make not only a physical trip, but also a symbolic trip over the Nile to take the deceased to the West Bank, to the land of the dead. The Nile connects these two worlds, the world of the living, the Nile is alive, with the world of the dead.
The Nile was as important to Saramput in death as it was in life. Alejandro would continue the search for his burial chamber. He is convinced it's somewhere overlooking this all-powerful river. In Cairo, at the Egyptian Museum, Eid is removing centuries of dirt and corrosion from a statue of Osiris, the powerful god associated with the Nile floods. He's hoping to uncover distinct facial features that will help him find out when the statue was made. A date will shed light on how long Osiris statues were important objects of worship.
The most difficult part to take the crust layer from above the gilded layer, because the gilded layer is really thin and so fragile.
Eid uses an ultrasonic pen. It generates high-energy sound waves to blast through tough layers of corrosion. It's the best tool for the task, but he must work carefully not to damage the statue itself.
The work should be done step by step and slowly under the microscope.
Eid's work on this statue alone will take months.
You know, when you see the result, the restoration at the end, and the result of your effort, and this is really an amazing feeling.
Eid can only properly analyze a statue when it's completely clean of dirt and other corrosion, like this one. Clues to this stunning statue's origin lie in the metal itself.
Now I am going to analyze the composition alloy of the statue. I want to know exactly what it's made from.
Bronze is an alloy, a mixture of different metals. Eid will compare the bronze in this statue to a database of statues whose dates they do know. He has a high-tech scanner that will tell him the exact alloy composition without damaging the statue.
This is the two beam of laser inside the device, and to make the analysis, it should be both of them at the same point. So I need to move the statue a little bit. And now we can run to make the analysis.
The scanner blasts the bronze surface with X-rays and records the energy released by the atoms. The metallic fingerprint could help Eid and Simon match this statue with one whose date is known and solve the mystery of the statue's age. On the west bank of the Nile, at Deir el-Bahari, Patrick inspects pieces of sarcophagus he's found in the hillside spoil. They originally came from one of the tombs high above.
Among hundreds of tons of this rock debris, we are finding magnificent fragments of block decoration. It's telling us that this is a very rich area, and the owner of the tomb from which it came was a very prominent person.
He's hoping fragments of sarcophagus will reveal the identity of its owner and lead him to the exact tomb that the skulls came from. Finally, a large section of sarcophagus gives him the hieroglyphic clue he's been searching for.
The characters here at the end of the text are telling us about the name of the owner, Htii. It means Hiti. This came from the tomb of Hiti, which is located above. This is really amazing to find something which is a precise information about the tomb's owner.
Hiti was an important high official in the royal court. He lived about 700 years before Tutankhamun and served a pharaoh called Mentuhotep II.
We found the crocodile bones in the same context as the sarcophagus, so it means they were stored together originally.
It's the final proof the crocodile skulls did come from Hiti's tomb in the cliffs above the spoil heap where Patrick was searching. Now he can investigate why Hiti would have wanted them there, and he knows precisely where to look. Hiti's tomb was first excavated by American archaeologist Herbert Winlock 100 years ago. Winlock and his team must have removed the crocodile skulls and left them in the spoil heaps below while searching for more valuable treasure.
This is the burial chamber of Hiti. This is his sarcophagus, where his body would be. And this is also the place where originally the crocodile remains were stored.
Tombs containing whole crocodile mummies are rare enough, but a tomb with just crocodile skulls is unique.
Putting the 9 crocodile heads next to Hiti's body could be connected with his belief that he can take his form in the underworld. We think that Hiti believed that his soul will transform his head into the crocodile's head, and in this way will take his power to fight with the enemies in the underworld.
Patrick's theory is that Hiti believed he needed the crocodile heads in his tomb for his journey to the afterlife. At death, his spirit would navigate through the underworld, and the crocodile heads would give it the strength of this fearsome reptile. With this enhanced power, Hiti believed he could overcome enemies and demons facing him along the way, so that he could travel safely to the field of reeds to live on in eternity.
The Nile crocodile was and is still one of the most dangerous animals in the Nile River. And of course that was quite obvious for the ancient Egyptians, who knew about his power.
The ancient Egyptians both feared and venerated the crocodile. They considered it a living symbol of the Nile's fertility
This is a unique discovery. I think that this is a dream of every archaeologist, to find something completely new, which is telling us and helping us to reconstruct the past.
In Cairo, Ede and Simon have finished scanning the statue of Osiris, the powerful god associated with the Nile floods. They're hoping the exact composition of its bronze alloy might be a clue to its date.
From the result here, I found the composition alloy of the statue is made from copper 80%, 2.3 tin, and 18% of lead.
Simon and Ede search a global database to find any other Osiris statues with the same distinct alloy composition. They find a match with a statue known to date from the 21st Dynasty. It's evidence that their statue dates to around 1000 BCE, between the reigns of Tutankhamun and Cleopatra, 1,500 years after Osiris first appeared in Egyptian mythology. To confirm this date, Simon and Ede will cross-check their findings using a very different technique, studying Osiris's face. In ancient Egyptian art, statues of gods were modeled on the reigning pharaoh. So a statue's face contains clues to when it was made.
You can really use the official representation of a king as a good dating criterion. The king, the private individuals, and the gods all have the same face.
And the face of this statue is also characteristic of depictions of gods and pharaohs during the 21st dynasty.
It's quite convincing. So both these criteria, style and metal composition, confirm it's likely to be around the 21st or 22nd dynasty, so around 900 or 1000 BC.
Ede and Simon have solved the mystery of when this statue was made. They have shown that Osiris had a firm and continued hold on ancient Egypt, 1,500 years after he first appeared in Egyptian myth. Their analysis of the remaining statues in the museum could reveal more about how Osiris, the god of death and the renewal of life, and the god associated with the annual Nile flood, was worshipped in ancient Egypt. Near Aswan, Colleen's investigation of how the Nile powered ancient Egyptian civilization brings her to a mysterious colossal structure carved into the riverbank.
I've seen a lot of monuments in Egypt, but this is one of the most impressive. I mean, the pyramids are huge, but as a single block of stone, this beats all.
In all her years exploring Egypt, Colleen has never properly examined this strange structure.
This is the first time I've ever been this close. It's huge. I can't even see the top from here.
Up close, Colleen can trace its outline and understand what it is.
This would have been the biggest obelisk ever attempted.
This colossal obelisk has been partially cut from the granite bedrock and left unfinished. These monuments were carved as a pyramid-shaped pillar. Pharaohs would erect obelisks adorned with inscriptions glorifying their name and their rule, to stamp their authority across Egypt. This obelisk would have stood 140 feet high, nearly 40 feet taller than any other.
What's most astounding to me is that it's a monolith. We're talking about a single, uninterrupted piece of stone from the tippy top all the way to the bottom.
It was commissioned by the female pharaoh Hatshepsut, who ruled 150 years before Tutankhamun, and was intended for a massive temple in Karnak, 150 miles downriver.
This is absolutely extraordinary. There is nothing else like this.
Obelisks were vital for the pharaohs, but they needed the Nile to get them to their pyramids and temples.
Egypt was incredibly lucky to have this sort of stone wealth. But without the Nile River, they couldn't have taken it very far.
The river was a conduit between south and north, acting as an ancient highway. Egyptians relied on the Nile for transportation, using prevailing winds to sail south and the current to help them row north. To carry light loads, Egyptians used small boats of papyrus reeds. For heavier loads, they used strong wooden ships. During the annual flooding of the Nile, they moved around 8,000 tons of granite from the quarries in the south to the pyramids they were building hundreds of miles north. They even designed huge cargo ships to transport giant 160-ton obelisks from Aswan to their temples further north.
All of ancient Egypt's monuments, from obelisks and temples to the pyramids themselves, would not have been possible without the Nile River. Think about how different ancient Egypt would look if they couldn't have used the river to transport these massive monuments.
Colleen investigates why Hatshepsut's colossal obelisk, the greatest ever commissioned, was left abandoned. She spots a clue left right under her nose.
This is really neat. This is one of the pounding stones. This dolerite pounder is actually one of the stones they used to carve this obelisk.
This stone was used to pound the rock into its obelisk shape.
These depressions show us the process that they used to carve bit by bit by bit. It was manpower and just chipping away piece by piece that this giant obelisk was carved.
Colleen spots a problem caused by the carving.
Here's some very large cracks that developed in the obelisk.
This was a problem that could not be fixed. The obelisk would have split into pieces as soon as it was moved.
These large cracks is why this massive project was abandoned.
The pharaoh's project proved too ambitious. Hatshepsut's colossal obelisk was doomed to stay stuck in the bedrock. It never made the journey downriver to adorn Karnak, Egypt's greatest temple. The ancient Egyptians relied on the mighty river Nile for every aspect of their lives. It allowed them to build the pyramids, temples, and monuments that came to define them. It fertilized their crops and enabled their cities to flourish in the dry desert landscape. In ancient Egypt, the Nile was life itself, its annual flood worshipped as a god.
It's impossible to think of Egypt without thinking of the Nile. We know that civilization started here because of the Nile River that enabled ancient Egypt to flourish for thousands of years.
At the bottom of a narrow shaft, lies a mysterious and unexplored ancient tomb.
This is full of skeletons.
Half buried in the deep sand lies incredible evidence linked to Egypt's greatest pharaoh, Ramses II.
That's a very nice. What's this? Oh my God, oh my God. Ooh, wow.
Throughout Egyptian history, no other pharaoh had a greater impact on the ancient civilization than Ramses II. He came to power in 1279 BCE, 44 years after Tutankhamun, and ruled for almost 70 years. Known as Ramses the Great, he transformed Egypt over the course of his reign. He expanded the country's borders and built colossal monuments like Abu Simbel and the Ramesseum mortuary temple. Ramses was so revered that 9 further pharaohs took his name. Today, archaeologists across Egypt are attempting to unlock the secrets of this iconic leader's reign. how he maintained complete power over Egypt throughout his long life, and how he made sure his fame endured long after his death. At Saqqara, in front of Egypt's oldest pyramid, the Step Pyramid of Djoser, Egyptian archaeologist Ola El Aguizi is excavating a necropolis filled with the tombs of Ramses' generals. These powerful figures played a key role in Ramses' extraordinary reign. Ola searches for evidence that could shed light on how he kept them loyal.
Every year it's getting more and more exciting.
Ola fell in love with Egyptology 50 years ago, and she has been exploring the burials at this site for nearly 2 decades.
The area proves to be very important, very interesting. It leads to lots of new information about the people during the Ramesside period.
Ola's team scours the necropolis for signs of unexplored buried tombs. She's found some strange holes cut into an ancient mud brick wall.
I noticed there were openings here that the workers, when they go down and come up, they put their feet. So that means that this is a shaft.
Ola believes these holes form part of ancient steps that workers used to climb in and out of a shaft during construction of the tombs here.
We have a piece of stone here, fragment, so it is really built especially for a shaft.
A shaft could lead to an undiscovered tomb. Her team start to excavate.
It's very, very exciting because we don't know exactly what we'll find. We hope to find a sarcophagus. We hope to find a statue, maybe.
Last season's finds show this site is full of ancient treasures from the reign of Ramses.
Ooh, ooh, beautiful!
And Ola thinks there are more beneath her feet.
It's not very deep yet, but we are sure that it is a shaft.
The shaft is not the only discovery to emerge from the sand.
Wow. This is a part of a jar with some signs here. You know, it might be part of the name of the god Tah, but written in Demotic. If I'm right, it would be that this shaft is dated to the 26th dynasty.
Demotic script came into use around 600 years after Ramses' reign. Its discovery here could mean this shaft wasn't built during the time of Ramses, like the others in the necropolis.
This finding is a proof of a later burial.
It could be a major setback in Ola's hunt for tombs from the time of Ramses the Great. In the ancient city of Abidos, Egyptian archaeologist Samer Iskander leads a team excavating at the first temple ever built by Ramses II. This season, Samer plans to dig in the areas surrounding the temple to uncover what it can reveal about Ramses' long-lasting influence over the country.
We've been working here for the past 15 years, and I feel so lucky to be in charge of this project.
Abidos was one of the ancient Egyptians' most sacred sites. They believed Osiris, god of the afterlife, was buried here.
It was the hope of every Egyptian to come here at least once in lifetime for prayers.
Samer originally trained as a civil engineer, but as a child, he always dreamt of excavating in Egypt.
I did not forget my dream. I went to New York University. I studied archaeology, Egyptology, my dream, and then my dream is coming true here.
During an earlier season, Samer unearthed Ramses' temple palace to the south of the main temple he built here.
We were shocked. We really did not expect this here.
Like other pharaohs before him, Ramses II built a temple here, dedicated to the god Osiris. In a courtyard, he placed 26 statues in honor of the deity. On the south side, he built the temple palace where he prepared for his duties as a spiritual leader and kept provisions for the temple in 10 storerooms. Surrounding the complex, he built a 25-foot-tall wall with an imposing granite gate. But the temple and its palace only occupied half of the enclosed space. Samer's goal is to excavate the remainder of the temple complex.
Every day is a special day. Every day there's something new. Every day there's a new theory. And every day, a lot of questions.
Samer and his team dig deep trenches on the hunt for lost buildings. Clearing away the layers of sand covering an ancient walkway, they make a surprising discovery.
All of a sudden, we find here, there's a cut in the floor. You can see the cut all around. Somebody cut in here and built an enclosure wall. And inside, there is a vaulted structure that's built, starts from here, from this enclosure wall here, all the way there.
The vaulted structure appears to be the roof of a building that's buried deep beneath the sand. Samer wants to find out if the structure was built during or after Ramses' reign.
We're going to start to excavate now to see if this is still intact, this wasn't disturbed.
To uncover what this structure is doing here and what it might reveal about Egypt's greatest pharaoh and his enduring influence over the country, Samer needs to unearth a way in.
For us, it's very exciting.
At Deir el Medina, in an acropolis high up in the hillside, French archaeologist Cédric Larcher leads a team investigating several high-status tombs.
It's a huge privilege for us to be able to excavate and study these beautiful tombs because it's a monument that belongs to the reign of Ramses II.
Cédric has studied ancient Egyptian civilization for 19 years and now lives and works in Egypt.
2 months of field season are so exciting. This is something all the team here and me especially we are waiting for.
This season, Cédric is focusing on the necropolis's most impressive tomb. It belongs to Ramses' architect, Nephoteep.
Ramses built a lot of monuments, needs good people, nice people, professional people around him, and Nephoteep was one of them.
Cédric wants to investigate Nephoteep's partially excavated tomb to see what it can reveal about Ramses' reign and the pharaoh's enduring appeal to the ancient Egyptians.
We have here a beautiful representation of the owner, Nephoteep. We know that it's him because his name is written here in hieroglyph above his head.
Next to it, a rare depiction of Ramses reveals Nephoteep's strong personal connection to the pharaoh.
This kind of thing, it's quite unusual.
The tomb reveals Nephoteep's work for Ramses in amazing detail. During Ramses' reign, Nephoteep was an architect and foreman in charge of a team tasked with building the tombs of the Valley of the Kings. He oversaw their work, their materials and supplies, and lived with them in the nearby workers' village. He succeeded his father and grandfather in building tombs and monuments for the pharaoh, but Nephoteep had no direct descendant to follow in his footsteps. When he died, he was buried in his ornate tomb at the highest point in the necropolis. In the tomb's courtyard, Cédric's team has uncovered the openings to 2 intriguing vertical shafts filled with debris.
We don't know what is inside, when they have been built. All of this remain a complete mystery.
The team gets to work removing debris from the first shaft. Cédric hopes it will lead to into a burial chamber.
This is very exciting now because I think we are very near the bottom.
In the Valley of the Kings, Aliyah Ismail is hunting for clues that could shed light on the dynasty of Ramses the Great.
Being here in the Valley of the Kings, it's one of the most beautiful feelings you'd ever have.
Aliyah has worked in the valley since 2016. She leads a team digitally recording the tomb of Ramses' father, Seti I. Ramses wasn't the first king of his dynasty. His father's lavish tomb shows he was born into a powerful and wealthy family. Aliyah wants to know how he built on his inheritance.
I want to know how Ramses the Great has ensured such an incredible dynasty.
First, Aliyah explores the tomb Ramses built for his sons. It might hold clues that reveal how the pharaoh crafted his dynasty.
Wow. I've never been to this tomb before. It's really exciting to be here.
At the end of the furthest corridor, a stunning rock-cut statue is evidence that Ramses built this tomb.
Wow, this is an Osiris statue. He has the crook and the flail in his arms. It's very beautiful, very intricate. It would have been painted. There are traces of paint on it.
The Osiris statue once bore the face of Ramses the Great. All depictions of gods were made to look like the reigning pharaoh. The statue helped guide the deceased into the afterlife. It stands at the heart of a highly unusual tomb. With over 120 near-identical chambers, stretching 150 feet across and more than 270 feet deep into the rock, it's the largest in the Valley of the Kings. Aliyah wants to know why Ramses built such an enormous tomb.
There are a total of 16 pillars in here. This is the biggest pillar chamber in a tomb in the Valley of the Kings. This is a very long corridor, and there are rooms on each side of the wall. There's so much debris in them.
To uncover why Ramses made his son's tomb so big, Aliyah needs to head deeper into the maze of dark corridors. In Abidos, at Ramses' temple complex, Samer and his team excavate the mysterious structure they have just discovered and search for an entrance.
You can see the marks of the hands of those masons that built it, and it runs this way. We don't know how long it's gonna go further west. Hopefully still intact, hopefully it wasn't disturbed.
Samer wants to know whether it can help reveal more about Ramses' hold over ancient Egypt. Clearing away the sandy debris, they begin to discover fragments of pottery.
What we have inside here is plaster that was used in building the structure of the temple.
One fragment in particular catches Samer's expert eye.
We just came across this piece, which is interesting. It's a piece of pottery, and inside the remains of burnt incense.
Burning incense was common practice during cult rituals. In ancient Egypt, cults were formed to worship a chosen god or goddess. Cults were a popular and everyday part of Egyptian life.
The fact that we found this piece here, it gives us a clue that there is some cultic activities around here.
If the team can find further evidence of cult activity, it could reveal how the temple was used. Crucially, the discovery helps Samer to date the structure.
I think this is a much later structure than the time of Ramses. This is Ptolemaic.
Ptolemy, the founder of the Ptolemaic dynasty, which ended with Cleopatra, became pharaoh almost 1,000 years after Ramses II. The pottery is a significant discovery. It reveals that someone a millennium later burrowed beneath this walkway to build their structure as close to Ramses' temple as possible. Sumer hopes to find out why. After hours of digging, the team uncovers an opening at the end of the mysterious building.
Now we're coming finally to the door. This is the entrance. We've opened this for the first time after 2,000 years. Oh, well.
In the Valley of the Kings, Aliyah wants to understand why Ramses built such a huge tomb for his sons, and what that reveals about how he crafted his powerful dynasty.
Oh, there's stairs here. Where do they lead to?
Along the dark corridors, faint remnants of ancient carvings adorn the walls, but they are badly eroded.
You can see that this salt crystals all over the place, and you can see this is definitely water damage. It appears that a flash flood could have taken place here.
The carved scenes could contain vital information about the tomb, but the erosion makes them almost impossible to decipher.
This bumpiness is all due to the water damage.
Aliyah finds a surviving section.
From what we can see here, there's a large figure, and it is followed by a smaller figure. This is for sure Ramses. And right next to him here would be his child.
This tomb isn't just for a few of Ramses' sons. It's for a great number of them. The tomb contains dozens of rooms. Many are burial chambers for sons of the king. During his life, Ramses had over 100 children, more than any other Egyptian king. He had an unusually high number of wives and consorts, over 200 in total. Some he married to seal foreign alliances, others to produce sons. He fathered 52 and secured a healthy male bloodline to succeed him on the throne. He built the vast tomb in the Valley of the Kings to bury them together so they could be close to their father in the afterlife.
Ramses II was always planning to have a big family, and that's why he built such a huge tomb. This seems to be his goal.
Having a tomb in the Valley of the Kings was a huge honor. By building his son's tomb here, Ramses hoped to give them a long and prosperous afterlife. He looked after them in this life too. On the wall, Aliyah can make out the role of one son.
The kind of dress that this character is wearing seems like priest robes. So this would have been maybe the son of Ramses as one of the high priests. It was a title that would have made him an important individual in the royal court.
Ramses gave his many sons important positions across the country to ensure their loyalty. These are the actions of an astute father and leader. Next, Aliyah wants to find out how Ramses used his loyal sons to further his reign and build his powerful dynasty. At the Saqqara necropolis, Ola's team has dug down 23 feet inside the new shaft, but they're yet to reach the bottom.
Good morning. Sabah al-khair.
Ola still hopes the shaft will lead to one of Ramses' military generals' tombs and shed light on how he kept them loyal.
We begin to find bones. It seems that we are on the verge of reaching the opening of the tomb. We are going to find something interesting, that's sure.
Bones are a promising indication that a burial chamber is nearby.
Yes. And this is another This is an amulet. They put it on the mummy for protection. There is a burial.
ايوه نظيف ايوه نظيف.
Digging further, the team reveals an opening to a chamber.
What we just found, it's an opening to the east.
Workers clear the entrance and lash together 2 wooden ladders for Ola to descend into the shaft and investigate.
I hope it is safe.
Whilst the team installs the ladder, Ola takes a moment to prepare herself for the long descent into the unknown.
This is the adrenaline that gives me the power to do that. If it wasn't for adrenaline, I would have been, I would have refused to go down.
The narrow shaft now descends a total of 26 feet. A fall here could be fatal.
This is the first time I go to this shaft. Terribly, terribly excited.
واحدة يا دكتورة براحتك يا دكتورة.
At Deir el Medina, Cedric's team excavates a shaft in the courtyard of the tomb of Ramses' architect, Nephoteep.
Now we probably reached 3 meters or 4 meters deep.
Cedric wants to find out what lies at the bottom of it.
We don't know yet why this shaft is here, how it is related to the tombs of the architect of Ramses the Great.
Cedric hopes the shaft could reveal more about Egypt's devotion to the great pharaoh. But there's a problem. The shaft's walls could collapse at any second.
This is part of the necropolis in Deir el Medina. The quality of the limestone, it's very, very weak. So we have to take care. We can't work as fast as we want.
After hours of careful excavation, they reach a lair with some promising signs.
It's like we reach some specific place in this shaft. We see some weird stuff, not usual, so I will have a look inside.
Cedric spots some intriguing clues scattered around the base of the shaft.
We just find here in this shaft some evidence of linen, embalming material. We also have some bones here.
Fragments of linen and bones are evidence that mummies could be buried close by.
I think we break through something here. We feel the wind from there. So there is probably something here.
The draft suggests they might have found the entrance to a chamber.
I don't know yet what it is. We should have to go deeper.
The team needs to clear enough space for Cedric to get in and explore. It takes 2 more days of excavation.
Oh, I think we just reached the bottom of the shaft.
They discover what could be the entrance to a burial chamber. But it's blocked by big boulders.
We don't know yet how to proceed, but we have to remove those stones.
The boulders are too heavy to remove by bucket. After careful deliberation, the team decides to try lifting the boulders out with a heavy-duty pulley rigged to a large wooden frame.
It's very, very heavy, and they have to take care of it. So they do it slowly, slowly.
فاضي 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 يا عم الحاج ابعد يلا يا عيون زود غلاقه فاضيه ابعد غلاقه فاضيه.
Eventually, they push the pulley into position.
This is very exciting now because with this system, we will be able to remove the last stone and enter finally in the burial chamber.
Workers carefully secure rope around the largest boulder and begin to hoist it out of the shaft. If it falls, it could kill them.
Take care. So this is the biggest stone now. It was difficult to remove it. But at least now the passage is big enough to enter inside the burial chamber. So let's push the ladder to go inside. Okay, yalla. Let's go. Well, we have a problem here.
More boulders still block his way in. They are deep inside the entrance, so the team can't use the rope and pulley to lift them. Cedric needs yet another plan.
We have to find a way to remove those big stones.
In Abidos, Samer and his team race to excavate the mysterious building buried beneath the walkway at Ramses' temple. Samer wants to know why someone a millennium after Ramses' reign chose to build a structure in this location, and what that can reveal about Ramses' influence over ancient Egypt long after his death.
We have reached the entrance. It's partially open.
But the team faces a new challenge.
We have to go down very, very careful. Otherwise, we can disturb the wall that might actually collapse somehow, or who knows.
Workers carefully remove the ancient mud bricks blocking the entrance.
I hope we can find something that tells us what is the mindset of this period, 1,000 years after Ramses.
This vaulted structure isn't the only curious discovery made by Samer's team. Elsewhere on the dig site, workers have uncovered a shocking scene.
We came across this storage area and we found this extremely unusual find. It's filled with these bones, mostly skulls of rams. We counted more than 1,200 ram heads. Some of them are wrapped in fabric.
But it isn't all gruesome skulls.
We came across this beautiful bell with its clapper in an excellent condition. And we have here 4 heads of animals that represents the gods. This was hanging from the neck of the ram and making that sound. It's extremely, extremely unusual find. And we're very happy with this, to find this here.
Samer thinks these carcasses are evidence of a specific cult.
It gives us an idea that there is a cult of the ram.
Ancient Egyptians saw rams as sacred symbols of fertility and as representations of their gods. Ram worship was prominent in southern Egypt, where they mummified rams and gave them ritual burials. The cult of the ram eventually spread right across Egypt, including Abidos. This huge collection could be evidence that cult practitioners collected ram skulls from hundreds of previous rituals and placed them all here in a grisly mass grave.
I have a feeling that this is a single event, that they were all collected at some point, and at a certain time in history, they decided that this huge amount of ram's heads belonged to the revered domain of Ramses II.
Samer believes the skulls were placed here because of the temple's connection to Ramses. Now, Samer wants to know if the vaulted structure also contains evidence of this cult. At the dig site, the team has safely removed enough debris to reveal the entire entrance. Samer can finally enter the mysterious structure for the first time.
It's so dark in here.
In Saqqara, Ola descends a narrow, unstable 26-foot deep shaft to explore the new tomb.
Finally, quite an adventure.
Ola wants to investigate whether this tomb dates from Ramses' reign, and if it can help reveal more about how the king kept his generals loyal.
Ooh. Wow!
The tomb contains pottery once full of food and drink for the deceased.
Quite different than what I expected, but interesting.
Ola discovers several niches carved into the tomb walls.
We have lots of burials in every niche, in every one of them. This is full of skeletons. What is this? Oh my God, oh my God. These are the ribs. Here you have a wooden piece which proves that there was a wooden sarcophagus.
These desecrated remains are evidence that robbers broke into the tomb looking for treasures buried with the mummies. They took the precious objects, but left behind other grave goods.
That's a very nice. This is part of a plate. And that's another one. Would you like a soup?
Ola recognizes the style of pottery and can use it to date these burials.
It might be dated to the later period, 26th Dynasty or so.
The 26th dynasty began almost 600 years after Ramses' reign. This could explain the pottery shard with Demotic text Ola discovered near the top of the shaft. It's beginning to look like this tomb doesn't have anything to do with Ramses at all.
All this needs studying.
But then, Ola spots something promising hidden among the buried jars.
That's interesting. This is the beard of the sarcophagus. That means that the person is an important one. Usually it's a symbol of high rank. One of the people who were around Ramses. That's interesting.
The carved wooden beard indicates a burial of someone of high status, possibly from the time of Ramses. The tomb could have been built during Ramses' reign, after all. And the artifacts from the 26th dynasty placed there centuries later.
It's the time when they reused the area for burial.
It was common for ancient Egyptians to reuse tombs centuries after they were first built. This makes it a challenge for Egyptologists to accurately date them. The discovery of another tomb that could date from Ramses' era is so tantalizing that Ola wants to dig deeper.
You know what we are going to do now? We're going to take out the sand which is in the niches and take all the things that we found out and sift the sand.
There's still a mammoth amount of work to do to uncover the full story of this tomb.
What an adventure! Woo.
But so far, it suggests that Ramses rewarded his generals with the hope of eternal life. The promise of a lavish burial here in sacred Saqqara, in the shadow of Egypt's first pyramid, secured their loyalty and helped Ramses maintain his dynasty. In Abidos, Sumer prepares to enter the 2,000-year-old structure for the first time.
It is really dark, and it's very difficult to really understand what's inside. We're going to get some lights so that we can go inside. Dini Nur, aywa, tamam, aywa.
Sumer hopes the structure, which was built 1,000 years after Ramses' death, will provide more evidence that a cult was active here next to his temple, and reveal more about the enduring strength of the pharaoh's influence over ancient Egypt.
It's large, but it's really surprising that the ceiling is plastered with mud in a very careful way. Go through the effort of plastering it here. It's kind of unusual.
Sumer searches for any inscriptions that might indicate the structure's purpose, but the walls are bare. Studying the structure's alignment, he believes the biggest clue to the importance of this building lies in its position.
This structure was built right along the northern wall of the temple itself. Very revered space. So they came during the Ptolemaic period and built this, obviously for some cultic activity.
Samer thinks this structure was likely never used. Its position right next to Ramses' temple suggests the cult was worshipping Ramses himself, even though the structure dates to long after Ramses' death.
Usually cults of other pharaohs last for 2 or 3 centuries. This is 1,000 years.
The buried structure, the pottery, and the ram's heads are all evidence of the strength of Ramses' enduring appeal. Samer believes it shows the pharaoh was being worshipped a millennium after his death, centuries longer than other pharaohs.
It says a lot about how important this pharaoh was in the mindset of Egyptians.
At Deir el Medina, Cedric's team are into their second day trying to enter what appears to be a chamber. It's located at the bottom of a shaft beside the tomb of Ramses' architect, Nephoteep. But inside the chamber's entrance, several unstable boulders still block their passage.
Clearly, it's not possible to take them from the air, so we'll have to find a way.
The roof of the entrance tunnel blocks the team from lifting the boulders with the pulley. Instead, they use a makeshift ramp to slide them out of the way. The entrance is finally clear, and the smell is promising.
When I went inside the shaft, I smelled the specific smell of the mummies. So before we enter inside the burial chamber, we clearly have to wear a mask to be safe.
Entering a new tomb containing mummies can be dangerous. The ancient bodies can carry mold that is harmful to humans. Cedric hopes the tomb will reveal more about the strength of Ramses' influence over the ancient Egyptians.
Whoa! Okay, bon.
It is a burial chamber. The end of the room is piled high with ancient remains.
Here we have a lot of kind of linen, kind of bodies of mummies. We have different way of mummification, embalming. It's clearly chaotic, so it was not the original organization. Something happened here, clearly.
A gruesome torso provides Cedric with a clue that helps him to date some of the mummies.
Most of the mummies we see are from the Ptolemaic time. It looks like this shaft and this burial chamber have been reused in the later period.
Cedric believes these later Egyptians may have chosen to be buried beneath Nephoteep's tomb because he was Ramses' architect.
Perhaps those people wanted to be close to someone that was very, very important during the reign of Ramses II, someone very famous.
A burial here meant they too hoped to share in Ramses' eternal glory. Evidence of the enduring strength of Ramses' godlike appeal.
So exciting to be here.
The burial chamber and these bodies are a remarkable discovery, but one that leaves Cedric and his team with a mountain of work ahead of them.
We still have a lot to do here. We have to understand what's happened here. Who are those people who are lying here? Many, many questions.
On the Nile's east bank, Aliyah has come to investigate the vast Luxor temple. Ramses richly rewarded his sons in death with a lavish tomb. Now, Aliyah wants to find out how they helped him build his powerful dynasty while they were still alive.
Just standing here in front of those huge pylons, you feel so small in comparison to this huge culture.
Large parts of the temple were built by Ramses, and he made sure everyone knew it.
Whenever you see the cartouches of Ramses the Great, they're always great. Great in size, great in scale, and you can recognize them right away because Ramses' cartouches can be seen from really far away. Other people's can't.
Hidden behind a row of columns, a remarkable relief depicts 17 of Ramses' children.
Here, the second child depicted is called Ramses. And the fourth one is called Kamwasid. And here, we are looking at Merenptah. It's quite unusual to have his children here in the temple on the wall, but doing so, he is putting them out there and showing the whole of Egypt who his children are.
Ramses didn't just publicly praise his children, he gave them powerful jobs throughout his kingdom. Ramses gave some of his sons high-ranking positions in the army to fight alongside him in his military campaigns. Together they mounted attacks north of Egypt against the enemy Hittites, laying siege to several of their fortified cities. He appointed other sons as high priests to lead cults and secure his religious and political authority. Ramses kept his sons close to him throughout his life to ensure control over Egypt and establish his powerful dynasty. After a 66-year-long reign, Ramses died, leaving the throne to his eldest living son, Merenptah. Ramses ensured his dynasty would survive by conceiving more than 100 children and placing many of them in key positions.
He has taught those children to follow into his footsteps, to do everything the way he envisioned. I think that Ramses conceived as many children as possible to make it impossible for someone to take the throne from the Ramessides.
The king's ingenious plan paid off. After a powerful and long-lasting reign, his bloodline remained on the throne for a further 3 generations. Ancient Egyptians may have worshipped him as a god a millennium after his death. And even to this day, we remember Ramses II as Egypt's greatest pharaoh. The hidden entrance of a huge underground shaft.
They did a lot of cutting.
That leads almost 70 feet through rock.
Must have taken a couple of months to dig this deeply and empty it out.
To a mysterious 3,000-year-old tomb, once filled with beautifully preserved mummies.
Wow!
And a solution to one of ancient Egypt's greatest mysteries.
The roof's gone down and it's much warmer and very dark. Oh, wow.
Ancient Egypt, a civilization that began 5,000 years ago and beguiles to this day. Its great pyramids, temples, monuments and tombs have endured for millennia. But at human scale, nothing has endured more than the mummy. The ancient Egyptians mummified their dead for around 3,000 years. They began before the time of the Great Pyramids and were still doing it at the very end of ancient Egyptian civilization. Mummies are stunningly well-preserved, silent witnesses to the mysteries of ancient Egypt. Archaeologists are hunting for more mummies to help them answer vital questions about the fate of the mightiest pharaohs and the ancient Egyptian way of life and death. In the ancient necropolis of Philadelphia, Egyptian archaeologist Bassem Gehad and his team have returned for their 9th season.
When I was a child, in our house, there was a small library. There was a lot of books about different things from ancient Egypt. I got fascinated by this. But then when you get adult, you start to think about searching for information and clues.
Bassem is investigating mummification during the period at the end of Egyptian civilization that started with the reign of Ptolemy I. The Ptolemaic dynasty was Greek. Unlike native Egyptians, Greek Egyptians did not believe their bodies had to be preserved to ensure eternal life. Many experts think that as a result, the quality of mummification declined in the Ptolemaic period. Last season, Bassem found several mummies in a Ptolemaic tomb here. One in particular was unusually well preserved.
This site is unbelievable for me. I can see here at the end of the room there is one complete mummy.
Bassem's discovery suggests that mummification had not declined and that the Greeks still practiced the ancient Egyptian art to a very high standard. Ancient Egyptians believed body and soul separated at death. They could reunite to live on in the afterlife, only if the corpse was well preserved. So priests removed internal organs and dried them and the body with a salt, natron, to prevent decay. After 40 days, they wrapped the body in resin-soaked linen to keep moisture away and bind everything together. They also wrapped up the organs and stored them in canopic jars to be recovered in the afterlife, but left the heart in the body for the soul to return to. Bassem is on the hunt for more mummies to help him prove the Greek Egyptians didn't radically change this process.
We have different types of tombs and graves here in Philadelphia. So we are excavating 1, 2, and 3 or 4, and perhaps most of these graves are intact, hopefully. We hope that we could be lucky this season.
But first, Bassem wants to examine the unusually well-preserved Ptolemaic mummy he discovered last year. To find out if it was mummified in the traditional ancient Egyptian way.
رشا امسك الطرف انت هنا. محمود تعال معايا الموميا بس. من ايوه. واحنا هنسحب الموميا من غير الالواح. انزل. ارجع انت بيها ورا. اوبس 100 الله ينور ممتاز. From the general appearance, for us it looks quite amazing in the style of the wrapping.
The best way for Bassem to understand how it was mummified is to X-ray it.
We want to check whether or not the mummification and embalming process was still practiced in the same manner.
Bassem and his team wait anxiously to find out the results of the X-ray.
Today, tuk-tuk.
In Cairo, mummification expert Salima Ikram is at the Museum of Egyptian Civilization. She is investigating the finest and most famous mummies ever found, the royal mummies. Many of the mightiest pharaohs of the past, including Ramses the Great, Hatshepsut, and the great queen, Amosi Nefertari, all rest here in high-tech, climate-controlled cases to protect them for posterity. When these mummies were unwrapped, archaeologists discovered that they were so well preserved, some still had their real hair.
It's such a pleasure to be here. I love being with the royal mummies. It's like being with old friends. We've been together for so long. And of course, these are kings. And how often do you really get to hang out with a king?
Salima wants to understand how these great kings and queens have remained so well preserved for thousands of years.
The best preserved Egyptian mummies are those of New Kingdom royalty.
Egypt's New Kingdom, the era of Tuten Carmun, stretched for nearly 500 years, from 1539 to 1075 BCE. One mummy in particular stands out, Seti I.
This is one of the most beautiful mummies ever made. He looks as if he's sleeping. I keep thinking he's going to open his mouth and say something to me.
Seti was the father of Ramses the Great and one of the most influential rulers of the New Kingdom. He died over 3,300 years ago.
It's really the most elegant man. His skin is perfectly preserved. He doesn't look all sunken and wizened, and his nose also stands proud. The embalmers went to great trouble and effort to give him this wonderfully living appearance.
When scientists scanned the body of Seti, they discovered exactly how they achieved this lifelike look. Analysis of the skin revealed that embalmers painted his face and body with a plant-based resin. They also packed bits of resin-soaked linen under the skin of his face, making it symmetrical. They stuffed his eye sockets and the back of his skull and neck. Seti's post-mortem cosmetic treatment prepared him perfectly for his expected afterlife.
The ideal, of course, for the ancient Egyptians was to have the body look as lifelike as possible so that the spirit could go into it and animate it in the hereafter.
Seti is miraculously preserved, but his survival and the survival of many other royal mummies is even more miraculous.
There are many challenges to mummy survivals, such as insects, changes in temperature, the flooding of tombs, and worst of all, tomb robbers.
Robbers looted almost all ancient Egyptian tombs, and mummies, particularly royal ones, were prime targets.
No sooner had someone been buried that shortly thereafter someone would come and rob the tomb. People would rip apart mummies to try and get to the gold that was hidden within, and they would even burn coffins and the mummies inside, because all that would be left would be the gold.
Yet Seti's mummy survived, preserved and intact for over 3,000 years. Now Salima wants to investigate how it avoided environmental decay and destruction by tomb robbers. At Deir el-Bahari, on the west bank of the Nile, near the temple of Hatshepsut, archaeologist Fatih Yassin is exploring a sprawling tomb complex filled with thousands of hidden underground chambers. It was begun in Egypt's New Kingdom and constantly used in later times. Its scale suggests it was built for somebody important, perhaps a high official. Last season, Fatih uncovered several huge new chambers.
I'm waiting 1 month to enter, so it is very special moment.
But nothing remained of the tomb's original owner. This year, he's on the hunt for the tomb owner's mummy. Fatih wants to find out who was in this unexplored tomb when they were buried here, and what their mummy might reveal about changes in Egyptian belief and the art of mummification.
We are working now in the tomb. We hope we find the mummy.
Fatih has worked as an archaeologist here for 30 years. His love for ancient Egypt started when he was just a young boy.
During the primary school, I visited the temple and how the ancient Egyptian built this temple. All of this make me interested in the ancient Egyptian history. Most of the time we are working directly under the sun. This means the heat, and also with the dust. The smell of the dust, it is like perfume for the Egyptology.
The dusty, dry environment makes it perfect for finding well-preserved mummies. Great for a mummy hunter like Fatih. His team has already excavated a huge area buried beneath the accumulated compacted sand and deep into the bedrock.
Here, it's quite impressive room, very big room, and curved very well. But still, we are not in the burial room. It means we are going deeper and deeper.
They have opened a new chamber, but it's filled with tons of debris and fragments of bone.
Look, full of debris, till few centimeters before ceiling. It gives us hope. Still we have a lot of things behind this big corridor.
It will need to be cleared before Fatih can uncover what's hidden beneath.
Maybe burial room, so it is very exciting moment for us.
The team begins to dig. Straight away, they find something extraordinary buried beneath the debris.
Ah, wow.
In the necropolis of the ancient city of Philadelphia, Bassem and his team are examining the results of the X-ray scan of the Ptolemaic mummy he discovered.
The mummy is for an adult male, more than 50 years, 55 years. There is a broken part on the back side of the skull. Most probably the brain was taken out from this hole. The stomach and all the internal organs were removed through a surgical operation. Hands lay down in a crossed way over the chest, touching the two shoulders in an Egyptian way. We called it the Osiris position.
High-quality mummies from this period are rare. The X-ray scans provide new evidence to support Bassem's hunch that during the Ptolemaic period, the Greeks in Philadelphia were more skilled at mummifying their dead than first thought.
This is a quite amazing example of the mummification process during the Ptolemaic period. It is quite complicated and very well made.
Old Kingdom priests in the 3rd millennium BCE dried the body with salt and wrapped it in linen to prevent decay, but the mummy's face would shrivel. Later, in the Middle Kingdom, a mask was placed on the mummy, painted to look like the deceased, so the soul might recognize its body. In the 1st millennium BCE, after the New Kingdom, mummification was even more sophisticated. The priests inserted linen under the skin and added false eyes to make the dead look more lifelike. But in the Ptolemaic period, the mummy's appearance was less important than an elaborately decorated coffin. Now, Bassem wants to see if his amazing Ptolemaic mummy was just a one-off, or whether this level of sophisticated mummification was more common in Ptolemaic Egypt than experts believed. His team has been working hard, excavating the vast Ptolemaic graveyard here. They have discovered a layer of mud bricks, usually a sign there is a coffin underneath.
We might find in this grave wooden coffin that one of the people who were living during the Ptolemaic period were buried inside.
Working alongside Bassem is Mahmoud Ibrahim. He's managed to remove a couple of the mud bricks.
اتكسر من قدام بس. ايه هو؟ تابوت خشب. بس اتكسر من قدام. جبلته غالبا بنتد.
It is a wooden coffin. It's an incredible find, but they still need to get past the protective layer of mud bricks that are covering it.
The situation is crucial because part of the roof of the mud bricks were already collapsing, so it broke one side of the coffin, which means that we have to do it very carefully and slowly in order to get the coffin out in good state without damaging it.
They have to work with great caution. One wrong move could further damage the 2,000-year-old coffin and harm any mummy hidden inside.
Yes, there is a lot of risk in dealing with such a fragile wooden coffin. It's made of the very thin plates of wood. It needs a proper excavation methodology to clean up the grave.
The team meticulously and carefully remove the layer of mud bricks. Bassem waits anxiously for a report. Finally, Mahmoud can get a good look at the coffin.
الوضع وضع مأساوي مأساوي يعني.
At Deir el-Bahari, on the west bank of the Nile, Fatih and his team are excavating a tomb, searching for the mummy it may contain and any evidence of when it was buried. They have found some pottery.
We don't know what it is exactly. It is billet or offering vessels or jar. We don't know yet.
It's a good sign there may be a mummy here. But they will have to clear the sand carefully to make sure that they remove the jar without any damage.
Wow. Hand catch with the rim. Here, we see the hand is complete, 2 hands. Catch it to the rim and the body. And it looks good condition, fortunately. Wow, I'm so happy. It's very rare to find something complete. Yes. Come now. Wow. Oh my God.
Ancient Egyptians believed they could take funerary offerings like this into an afterlife.
This jar could be offering for the deceased, so we are here in the right place. We are the first to catch it and discover it since thousands of years ago. It is the nicest thing we found.
The jar is great evidence that the mummy Fatih is looking for could be close. But there is still a lot more rubble to get through.
We are going slowly because we are see the debris mixed with bones and the linen.
Bones and linen are further indications that there might be a mummy. And there's more.
With wood like this, I have to keep it. We will see this part from coffin, but all of this funerary object.
Fatih bags the wood, linen and bones separately so they can be taken for closer examination.
Wow.
It looks like the face of a mummy. In the Valley of the Kings, Salima is investigating how Seti's mummy escaped natural hazards and tomb robbers for over 3,000 years.
This is the most sacred and secret spot of ancient Egypt because this is where the kings of Egypt in the New Kingdom came to be buried. The hope was that the kings would come and rest here for all of eternity.
Seti, an important king and father of Ramses the Great, has one of the biggest and most ornate tombs in the valley.
This is such a beautiful tomb. The painting and the quality of carving are absolutely exquisite. It's really the most glorious tomb in the Valley of the Kings.
The tomb's 10 chambers extend deep into the bedrock.
You can see that we are getting this crescendo of scenes and texts that tell us that we are approaching the place where Seti was buried. And this is Seti's burial chamber. This is where the king's sarcophagus would have been and his coffin. He was supposed to rest here for all of eternity.
Seti built himself a beautiful tomb and chose the perfect place for his mummy.
Seti really had a spectacular burial. And what was extra good was, because it was so deep, the temperature remained constant, and this was excellent for the preservation of Seti's mummy.
Seti died in 1279 BCE. A long and peaceful incarceration here would explain his mummy's survival. But when 3,000 years later, an Italian archaeologist discovered the tomb, he was in for a shock.
When Belzoni entered the tomb in 1817 and came into the burial chamber, he found that Seti's sarcophagus had been broken open and the mummy had vanished. So the alabaster coffin would have been right here, just in front of me. But when Belzoni found it,
it clearly shows in the picture that it was empty.
Salima wants to follow the trail of Seti's mummy. Incredibly, archaeologists discovered it wasn't just Seti's mummy that was missing from his tomb. Many of the pharaohs buried in the Valley of the Kings were also missing. In the ancient necropolis of Philadelphia, Bassem and his team are excavating a grave, removing mud bricks that have been weighing heavily on the wooden coffin they've just discovered.
We are all excited because you can't just find an intact grave every day. So for us, this is a day to celebrate.
They are making progress and beginning to see what's inside. Bassem hopes this discovery can prove that the Greeks here still practiced the ancient Egyptian art of mummification to a very high standard.
Now we are standing on a wooden coffin, which is one of the most important things that you could find here in the Ptolemaic cemetery.
But the mud bricks have caused some damage.
The heavy weight of the mud bricks collapsed on the roof, and then the roof of the coffin took deformed shape.
Mahmoud needs to determine if it's safe to begin the nerve-wracking task of lifting it.
We will see if we need to remove the other row of the mud brick blocks. The coffin will be okay to lift up.
But their delicate operation is threatened by a sudden change in the weather.
It seems that it might rain, and if it rains, the situation becomes alarming because of the state of preservation of the wood. The priority is to lift up this coffin as fast as possible, and then we move it to the study room.
A heavy downpour at this critical moment could be catastrophic for keeping this coffin intact.
And we will lift it by hand, against time and against the condition of the wood. But condition, it will be very, very hard to lift it.
Everyone on site must act quickly. They don't have ropes, so they have to improvise. Cautiously, they wrap their scarves tightly around the coffin.
استنى يا عاشور طير طير بسم الله طير يا عاشور ريح ريح اوصل قدام
كده امشي على بيتي بالراحه انت بعيد من بيتك بتاعت كسر خوف
So excited. It's unbelievable. We did it. Yes, it was so difficult, so sensitive, and then, alhamdulillah, we did it.
But the hard work isn't over. The team still has to get the coffin to the tent before they can open it and find out if it contains a mummy. At Deir el-Bahari, in a tomb near the temple of Hatshepsut, Fatih is carefully uncovering a mummy he's found in the rubble.
Here it is exciting moment because we have a skull, and there's the face of the mummy, and it looks in front of me in good preservation.
It's an incredible find for Fatih. If the rest of the mummy is intact, he might be able to determine who this person was and when they died. The mummy might also reveal changes in Egyptian belief and the process of mummification. But first, Fatih and his team must carefully free the mummy and any artifacts nearby from the ancient grave. Slowly, the intact torso of the mummy emerges. And next to the mummy, a key discovery. It's small and broken, but Fatih can immediately recognize its importance.
Ancient Egyptian removes the internal organs, all the things inside the mummy, and put it in separated jars, put it in 4 jars. We call it 4 canopic jars. This, for sure, is part from one of them.
The canopic jar is a crucial piece of evidence. Their use changed throughout ancient Egypt, depending on the traditions of the time. In the Old Kingdom, Egyptians used plain canopic jars to store the mummy's internal organs ready for the afterlife. In the Middle Kingdom, they wrote protective spells on the jars and carved the lids to look like the deceased. In the New Kingdom, the lids featured the heads of a human, a jackal, a baboon, and a falcon. Each represented one of the sons of the god Horus. In later periods, embalmers placed the mummified organs back inside the mummy, but left empty canopic jars in the tomb as part of the burial ritual. Fatty will need to find more pieces of the canopic jar to help him determine its date. But it's good evidence that this mummy had its organs removed, a sign of a high-status burial. Fatty works his way down the mummy's body towards the chest.
Usually we'll find the mummy, put the arms above the chest, and we call it Osiris position, like this. But in that case, we found the arms going down under the belly, and this also very important.
It's a rare find, and if Fatty can determine a date of burial, it could signify an important change in the mummification process and ancient Egyptian beliefs. Expertly working down the torso, Fatty discovers the mummy is male. It has an individually wrapped penis. And he also discovers the legs below the knees are missing. It's likely they were damaged and discarded by tomb robbers as they moved the body, searching for treasure.
During our excavation of the debris, we found the rest of the mummy.
Near Luxor, in the Valley of the Kings, Salima is investigating how Seti's mummy survived for over 3,000 years. Clues left in the tombs here, long after Seti's death, might explain the mysterious disappearance of his mummy from his tomb.
Many of the royal tombs have graffiti that tell us that a scribe called Tutankhamun and a few others went around and were collecting the bodies of the kings of Egypt.
Around 200 years after Seti died, Egypt suffered an economic crisis that led to civil unrest. For 50 years, tomb looting surged. Robbers desecrated mummies and stole their hidden valuables. In response, pharaohs ordered officials, such as Tutankhamun, to remove treasures from the royal tombs and keep them for the state. But it was crucial they kept the royal bodies safe, too. They moved the mummies and hid them in a more secure and secret location for these ancient rulers to rest in eternity.
We know that this was a state-sponsored project, and on one level, it was basically legalized theft. But on another, it was also a way of keeping the dead kings of Egypt, the gods of Egypt, safe and secure in a secret, hidden place.
The ancient graffiti does not say which royal mummies were moved and where they went. Salima wants to track down their secret location to find out if Seti's mummy was there and if it can explain its remarkable survival from environmental decay and tomb robbers. At Deir el-Bahari, Fatty is excavating the area around the mummy he has just discovered, looking for clues that could help him date the period of this man's burial.
Wow. I see here wood also, with colors, black and red color. This is very amazing. This is representing the most important thing concerning the mummy.
It is a fragment of a stylized portrait of the deceased, its color beautifully preserved for thousands of years. It would have been painted on the lid of the coffin in the hope that the man's soul would recognize it. and find his body in the afterlife. It gives Fatih a tantalizing glimpse of the face of the man buried here.
We didn't find these things every day.
This stylized portrait suggests the mummy could date to the late period of Egyptian history, just before the arrival of the Greeks. Fatih now needs to move the mummy so he can study it in greater detail. It is extremely delicate. Fatih hopes to X-ray the mummy next. That will reveal whether its organs and brain were removed and tell him more about how mummification developed in the course of ancient Egyptian history. But already, it's a remarkable find. A high-status, late-period male.
For the first time since 1,000 years ago, the mummy outside of the tomb.
Another discovery to add to Fatih's record of incredible mummy finds. In Deir el-Bahari, Salima is on a mission to find the hidden resting place of the royal mummies, moved from the Valley of the Kings. She hopes it might reveal the fate of Seti's mummy and how it escaped the tomb raiders for over 3,000 years.
Hatshepsut's temple of Deir el-Bahari is over there, and beyond that is the Valley of the Kings. But I'm not going there. I'm going up there.
Hidden halfway up a cliff is a concealed entrance to a huge underground shaft.
It's really fabulous to actually be here and to be able to go down this incredibly long, deep shaft.
But Salima is taking no chances. The shaft is almost 70 feet deep. A fall from this height could be fatal.
Really, such a wide thing. They did a lot of cutting. Must have taken a couple of months to dig this deeply and empty it out. Pretty amazing to have carved all of this. Wow. It's fantastic. It's really amazing.
At the base of the shaft, a long tunnel stretches deep into the bedrock.
It certainly is narrower than the shaft coming down. And you can feel it getting warmer as you go in. Gosh. And now the roof's gone down and it's much warmer and very dark.
The sides of the shaft are lined with niches in the rock.
Wow.
These small hollows were the final resting places for dozens of mummies, including some of the most famous kings and queens of Egypt.
It's amazing to think that this is where Egypt's greatest pharaohs used to rest. It's unbelievable that so many bodies would have been put into this space in their coffins.
Salima explores further to see if this deep underground tomb could lead her to the spot where Seti was hidden.
Oh, wow.
In the ancient necropolis of Philadelphia, Bassam and his team get the newly discovered coffin into the examination tent.
It seems that it is not the local wood that is found in Egypt. This is expensive imported wood, which gives us the impression that this was someone who was elite.
He searches for more clues.
Looking to the coffin, the lead in this triangular shape with this part resemble the facade of the Greek temple, which indicate the Hellenistic influence or maybe a Greek person.
Bassem is hoping that the body will be mummified in the Egyptian way, to prove his hunch that Greek Egyptians in the Ptolemaic period still practiced the ancient art of mummification to a very high standard.
This is the moment that we were waiting for. طاير كده طاير كله طاير كده يمينك شمال عمر يمينك ايوه يا بالراحه.
It's an incredible mummy, unseen for 2,000 years.
I can see here something unique inside the coffin, a floral crown over the head here. This is basil that you can find on the bank of the river or the canals. Greek word Basilicus photon, or the royal plant, which indicate that it was important plant during the Ptolemaic and Roman period.
It's further confirmation that the mummy dates from Ptolemaic Egypt. The team gets to work, recording the details of their find. They need to X-ray the mummy to determine the level of mummification it had.
If removing of internal organs took place within this embalming process, as we can see it, which means that this was a high-quality mummification.
The mummy is extremely fragile. They will have to do the X-ray while it's still inside the coffin. Bassem examines the scans.
This guy survived for more than 60 years in a period that the range of life is between the 30 and the 40s. We can see these are very well preserved. He could have a good, expensive kind of food. And then also, we can't see any kind of bone inflammation, which means that he was not doing hard work.
The forensic detail gives Bassem an incredible insight into this 2,000-year-old man.
So for this case, we have someone who lived a very wealthy and good life, and also a good afterlife treatment with this wealthy coffin. So we are talking about elite person.
A wealthy man like this could afford the best mummification. Bassem looks for evidence his organs were removed and stored separately.
We can see the internal organs were not fully removed.
The discovery that the mummifiers did not remove the organs intensifies the mystery of mummification in this period for Bassem. But every new find is precious to him. He will continue to examine this mummy and reveal all its secrets.
All in all, the whole information help us in writing new history of the mummification process in Egypt.
And he'll continue searching for evidence that the art of mummification was still alive and well in the Ptolemaic period, at the end of Egyptian civilization. Deep in a cave in Deir el-Bahari, above Hatshepsut's temple, Salima is on a mission to find the secret resting place of Seti I and other royal mummies moved from their tombs. She hopes to reveal how Seti survived in such good condition and avoided tomb raiders for over 3,000 years.
This is where Seti was laid to rest for so long and stayed here for almost 3,000 years.
A hidden location near the tomb entrance kept Seti safe from harm until his discovery just over 140 years ago.
It's really quite remarkable to be in the same space.
In the late 19th century, archaeologists discovered this tomb and followed it 180 feet into the mountain. In the burial chamber, they found 6 coffins, and over 40 coffins, some from the New Kingdom, lined the corridors. Amongst them, some of Egypt's most famous pharaohs, including the coffin of Seti I. An inscription on the front describes the mummy's move from his tomb in the Valley of the Kings to this secret spot. Inside, his beautifully preserved body.
It says that he was moved twice to the tomb of Amenhotep II, and then to the tomb of a royal woman, and then finally to this place here.
The royal officials who moved Seti chose this location well. It's deep, cool and dry, preserving his mummy. And it's secret, keeping it safe from tomb robbers.
It certainly is hidden and very secret. So no wonder it was thought to be a safe place to keep the New Kingdom pharaohs, safe for eternity. It certainly worked, because it preserved them beautifully as it did.
Seti's mummy and the entire cache of royal mummies have survived in pristine condition for over 3,000 years, thanks to the skill of those who first embalmed them, and those who hacked deep into the bedrock to build a tomb to preserve and keep them safe. They are the embodiment of the most beguiling civilization of antiquity. Today, archaeologists continue to hunt for more mummies, to help them solve the many remaining mysteries of ancient Egypt's fascinating way of life and death.